What does this mean in terms of the Syrian refugee crisis? Obviously, hundreds of thousands of victims of what's going on in Syria. And now, whether or not they're able to get into Europe is going to be questioned even further.
Yeah, I'm not sure why this shocks anybody. There is not a vetting process, despite what people will tell you, that can vet every single individual coming in on the refugee program. So now you have some 800,000 to 900,000 refugees across Europe that have the ability to move across borders at any time they want. What really told me something interesting in this plot is you had someone that is likely to have been smuggled in, probably more than one when it's over, hooked up with an organization that was on the ground. So they did the surveillance, they did the vetting of the targets. They had this refugee, committed jihadist, committed suicide bomber, hook up with people who are already in the country. That is a dangerous, dangerous recipe, and you're going to see more of this.
And Shadi, you know, it's interesting if you game it out. Okay, let's say Europe closes its borders and the refugees are left to fend for themselves, or they're put in these massive deportation camps, refugee camps. That might be a horrible recipe to create terrorists as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that the point of terrorism is to provoke target populations to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. ISIS wants to create rifts and civilizational wars. It wants to divide the French people, and it wants to alienate French Muslims to say, look, France is against you, they're against refugees, Europe is turning to the far right. We have to be very careful about this us versus them kind of rhetoric. There's perhaps one refugee that was part of this out of hundreds of thousands. That's kind of a collective punishment if you say, well, then we're going to try to stop all refugees from coming in because of one person. ISIS is trying to exploit refugees to create this anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-refugee sentiment. Let's not fall into their trap.
Robin, you have a piece in the New Yorker just out this morning, and you write, among other things, quote, the battlefield against Islamic Jihad, against these radicals, now spans continents. Do you think President Obama fully understands the extent of the threat, that this goes beyond what's going on in Iraq and Syria?
Oh, I do. And I think that's one of the most important things that's happening right now in parallel to the terrible crisis in Paris is a diplomatic effort to deal with the future of Syria. And how can you bring 17 very disparate political parties, countries together to try to negotiate a solution? Because at the core of the problem is the future of the most strategic country in the Middle East, one that borders Israel and Jordan and Iraq and Turkey and Lebanon, and that has reconfigured the borders of the Middle East. This is a threat that has now spanned continents, not just a migration threat in Europe, but we're now seeing, we've seen in all 6 inhabited continents, some form of Islamic threat or challenge to the West. And I think the administration is trying to figure out a way, how do you solve a problem? Yes, these issues of migration will clearly deserve more attention, but they also, fear shouldn't dictate what we do next. We have to be smarter in looking at the bigger picture, and I think there's a beginning of that process. Will we get there? It's a huge question, but this is, for the first time, you have all the major parties to the Syrian conflict at the table.
I think we got to intensify our airstrikes against Raqqa. I think we have to go right at ISIL's home territory, right at their headquarters, and we have to put maximum military pressure.
Why are they holding back
Syria.
right now? We know where the command and control is. Why is the United States not striking it?
I don't know, Jake, but I think we have to intensify the effort. I think we have to do that. I think we also have to empower more special operations forces from the United States to work with potential allies like the Kurdish Peshmerga operating in northern Iraq to undertake specific targeted raids at ISIL strongholds. We saw that this past week. That was successful in that area in northern Iraq. And I think we have to do more things like special operations raids into eastern Syria that took down Abu Sayyaf, airstrikes in Libya, airstrikes in Raqqa. The whole military effort needs a massive intensification.
The problem is that 75% of the warplanes we dispatch to bomb Iraq and Syria end up flying back with their bombs because these targets move, or they're in urban environments where it's very hard to accurately target and not create a lot of collateral damage. So there's a real problem there. As every party has said, there is ultimately no military solution to this. You can kill 1,000 a month, which is what we're doing, but that's not going to create a solution to the core problem.
But the military element is an important part, and we can't just kind of discount that. And it's remarkable to me that ISIS has been on our radar for more than a year now. There are no excuses. But I can't think of a single country in the world that has made ISIS the #1 foreign policy priority. We haven't, quite frankly. We've been very reluctant, dragging our feet, doing too little too late. And then there's also the question of Syria. We have not had a Syria strategy ever for the past 4 years since the uprisings began. And we have to address this issue of the Assad regime, which is sort of the mirror image of ISIS in some ways. So there's just such, it's remarkable to me how devoid of strategy we are, and I hope that this is a wake-up call.
The one thing we have to be careful of is, and I'm fully supportive of the French invoking Article 5 under the UN, we should be engaged in this with our NATO allies and with others in the defense and destruction of ISIS. However, revenge keeps coming up in those conversations. This needs to be a strategy. If this is only about a revenge attack, we will make a serious mistake. People are going to be very interested in throwing everything at them early. They're part of the reason those sorties come back with bombs, not only because the targets are moving, is also because our intelligence on the targets on the ground is not as good as it should be. That's going to happen with more engagement with our special forces in the community and directly targeting their command and control. You start doing that, you're going to have an immediate impact. Revenge in and of itself is no way to plan a defeat of ISIS.
Congressman Chadi, Robin, Jeremy, thank you so much. Appreciate all of you.